Welcome to Just Being Intentional with Thomas Harris. My name is Thomas Harris. I'm the host here, and we thank you for being here with us. First things first, we want to make sure that we get this thing continuing to go on. So we thank you for your support in this. So if you would, go ahead and like and subscribe so we can continue to get these stories out there to you guys. We got some really powerful stories coming into this show. So once again, we thank you for being here. With that being said, I have a very special guest here on the show today. Talitha Phillips is the Chief Executive Officer of Claris Health, and this is based out of Los Angeles. Talitha is also a friend of mine. I thought it'd be a wonderful idea to bring her on to this show today. So you're all in for a treat as we introduce Talitha. Talitha, thank you for being here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Claris Health, can you tell us about your company, what you represent?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Claris is, we're a nonprofit here. We've been based in Los Angeles since the 70s. So we're about to celebrate 48 years, actually,
Wow.
as an organization.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah. It's been around for quite a while. But we've expanded throughout the years as we've really sort of seen some of the needs in the city. So we primarily work with pregnant women and families with kids under the age of 5, but we've expanded far beyond that, but mostly doing medical, mental health, and support services. The word Claris means clarity. And that's really what it's about. If I could sum it up in one sentence, it's just bringing clarity to what can feel like really confusing or dark situations in life and journeying with people through those.
Okay, so the core services that Claris provides for your clients are?
We do medical care. So everything from, some people come to us when they first find out they're pregnant. We have a very unique prenatal care program called Centering Pregnancy. So it's group-based prenatal care. We do STD or STI testing and treatment. We do, so we kind of break the services in this before, during, and after. So if you think about like before you're pregnant, what are all the preventative types of services? Our goal would be to hopefully put ourselves out of business because people don't need our services anymore. So we have like a youth education program that goes into local schools and working with young people on the preventative side. And then that's where some of the STD testing and everything comes in as well. And then in those moments, if you think you might be pregnant, and then after can look very different depending on some of the choices that people make. So we do have prenatal care, we have parenting classes, material assistance, therapy. I guess therapy runs through all of them, right? So anybody that needs to talk to a professional counselor, I think sometimes when you face these issues, you realize there's a lot of other traumas or past situations that are sort of come up. So we offer that. And then there's adoption support for those who might choose to place for adoption, and then post-abortion support for anybody that walks through that decision. So it's very comprehensive, very holistic, or what in medical terms is called integrated care. Just thinking about how you're not just a physical being. There's the emotional aspects as well.
Well, you don't have to tell me that this is a much needed thing for the world, because there's a lot of things going on, and a lot of people trying to make decisions, but the best possible decisions, and you guys are helping them do that. So what would you say are some of those pivotal moments or the inspiration for you to start doing this? It's been, 23, 24 years or so?
Yes, I'm about to celebrate my 23rd anniversary here. Half my life, basically half my life, literally half my life.
Wow. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. It's interesting. I mean, I'd love to say this. I dreamed of doing this, and I do have kind of a funny thing that I thought of recently when I was little. My parents were missionaries, and we grew up overseas, and I went to German school. And back in the day when, you walked 5 miles to school, but no, literally we walked a very long way to school every day. And I remember, back in the days when our parents, trusted us, or I don't know, or didn't know any better. So I remember as a little kid, walking to school one day, and I would always have this, idea. And I would tell some of my friends, like, when I'm older, I'm going to have this house on the beach, for pregnant girls to live, which is such a weird thing because I must have been between like 8 and 10 years old. And we had, as a family, we'd been in Amsterdam for a while and we were in Germany. And so I was very used to seeing needs around us. And I think my parents actually did a really good job of translating that to something that a kid could understand. So I don't have a house on the beach and I don't have pregnant women there, but there was this weird thing that I had this idea that there were girls that could need help and that I wanted to in some way be a part of that. So flash forward, never imagined I'd work for a nonprofit, never imagined I would do anything like this. But my being here really came from a very personal experience that I went through. And I turned to Claris for help when I was in college and went through one of their support groups for other women who, like me, had experienced an abortion. And it changed my life in so many ways. And I think initially when I went through it, I thought, well, this was amazing and thank you. And I'd love to volunteer in some way and give back. But there were obviously much bigger plans. And so me coming here was more of an act of surrender where others actually said, we really think you should work at this, at the time, tiny organization. We really feel like you should work here. And I ran from it for quite a while. And then finally had this sort of surrender moment of maybe I am supposed to do this with my life. And here I am, all these years later, and I can't really imagine doing anything else because it has become such a calling in my life.
Wow. Some of this is brand new information for me. Like, you and I know each other, but we don't, we haven't gotten deep in the, below the surface as far as knowing each other. But that's kind of the surprise about doing the show is I get to hear some of the things about people who haven't really talked about some of those experiences. So it's important. And that's my motivation for doing this is to hear about people and where they come from and where they are today and where they're planning to go in the future. So this is awesome stuff. So you already talked about your, personal values, through your own experience, which is part of the motivation while you're doing this. So, can you share any, one or two stories during your time with Claris that were impactful, for you? Some of the young women that you've helped along the way, that just kind of reaffirm what your purpose is in doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. There's so many faces that, pop into my mind as I think about it. I think, there are a few that really leave an impact on your heart and in your life. And the first one I'm thinking of is actually was an adoption story where a young woman came to Claris and made an adoption choice and ended up needing a place to stay for a while and moved in with us for the last, I think, 6 weeks of her pregnancy, which is a very, there's so much more to that story of how that happened. But I had never had a lot of very personal experience with adoption. And so going through that, and then I should say I'm a doula on the side. So I go through birth, labor and deliveries with tons of women. I've been doing that as well for 23 years. So I got to be her doula and went to the hospital with her. And I will never forget the moment that the family came to pick up the baby and how she was very conflicted in that moment of whether she was going to go through with it. And I remember, here I was going, no, you can't choose. Obviously I didn't say any of this to her, right? But in the moment I'm like, how are we going to hand this baby over to another family? And we can make this work. And the truth is we could. And even through Claris, there was we would have wrapped our arms around her and helped her raise this child if that was the choice that she wanted. But she had made this adoption plan and she had decided that was the best decision for her. And so walking through that and seeing the loss, driving her home to our house without a baby and watching as, she's supposed to be breastfeeding, but there's no baby and all the things that we walked through and how painful that was. And then a few years later, my youngest daughter was adopted. And so walking through on the other side, being the family that drives home with the baby and loving this birth mom so much and wanting to honor her through this. And so that was one of those where I really feel like I experienced the first thing because I needed to know the depths of that grief to then be on the other side. So this isn't like a winning and losing, right? Like it is a difficult decision that people walk through. So that's the one that really sticks out. And then I have, so many others. There's, so many situations where the people who we've served become a part of our life. I think there a lot of people say when they came to Claris, they feel like they were treated like family. And even if that's just for a 30-minute or a 90-minute appointment, or whether there's, the other story I'm thinking of, is a very tragic story, but a young woman who came to us and was very unsure of what she was going to do with the pregnancy, and then found out it was twins, and they chose that they wanted to continue the pregnancy, and they gave birth to these twins, and our community wrapped their arms around them. And then one of the little boys tragically died when he was a few months old, and the community planning a funeral and walking through just the most devastating grief with this family. And they're still in our lives today. They don't live in California, but just walking through that and just realizing, like, when you really journey with people, you're there for the highs and the lows, and you realize that this is not just a one, sometimes you're there just a moment in life, but their life goes on. And so all these decisions that you make, there's a lot of life to be lived after that decision. And so being willing to just step into that with them is really
and you're
special.
you're making a huge investment in these individuals' lives, because that's what you signed up for, right? You're an advocate for them. You want to help them to make the best possible decision, even though it's their decision. But you want to say that, hey, we're here to support you as long as we need to, because we love you and we receive you as you are, and we just want to help you. You share a common interest with my sister-in-law, Katie. You both are doulas. She does really great work, and so you guys have those conversations about doula work. And I'm sure a lot of those situations that you find yourselves in, there's a lot of joy, but there's also a lot of sorrow in those moments too, because you're opening yourself up to, sometimes the worst thing can happen, and you're right there in the thick of it. So how do you deal with those times where it doesn't turn out the way that you anticipated?
It's a good question. I mean, I think perspective is helpful. I think if we are in relationship with others because our focus is on the outcome, we're always going to be disappointed, right? Because this is human nature, and you're living your life and I'm living my life. And so if I'm in a relationship with you because I want you to do things, then I'm going to always be disappointed because you are a separate person. So I think perspective to say, I'm in this person's life for a reason, and maybe a season, maybe it's a reason and it's a season, right? But the reason I'm there is to link arms and to join them and to listen, and to process and to offer advice where I'm invited to or where I can. But a lot of times it's just helping them navigate. I mean, I think one of the number one things I like to ask people, especially in the situations that we see, is if you could silence all the voices in your head, what would you do? Right. And most of the time I'm met with this big pause because no one's thought about what they want, because there's so many people telling them what to do. So I think for me, it's like, look, if somebody at the end says, they want to do something that I don't think is maybe the wisest decision or maybe the best, it's still the decision that they're walking through. And if they feel more educated about that, or if they feel more loved, that they're not going through this alone, I think for me, that's a big deal. And sometimes it's having to bite our tongues. And sometimes it's just saying, I love you, or I'm here for you, or I support you, where you're at.
Yeah. So sometimes, we as believers, we want people to speak into our lives, but tragically, sometimes there's too many voices in our lives and it's not helpful. Some people just kind of overstep. They just do too much. And sometimes just the less is more. in a lot of cases, because, it just makes that person more confused about what decisions they need to make with their lives. So for the people that are just there and primarily they're just listening and trying to understand this person's situation better, and that involves getting the backstory rather than just be the person with just input, rather than, be the person that's saying, what is going on? How did you get in this situation? And how can we assist you in getting into a better space? So, you just being there as an advocate is extremely helpful for those individuals that are going through these, some of the biggest decisions they'll ever make with their lives. So you brought up adoption, and you have adopted yourself. So we know that adoption plays a significant role in discussions about reproductive health, because it's giving options for people who, I think about my mom. My mom was 16 when she had me. And, I don't know if adoption was even on her radar. She said herself, like, abortion is not an option for me. So even knowing that her life would be extremely difficult raising a baby, when she's a kid herself, but you found a family or a woman that had that in mind, and you were able to take this child home to be yours. And we talked about it recently about how God adopts us into his family. So it's a picture of what on the human side, what we do in this on earth with the gift of adoption. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, I think, I think adoption is really nuanced, like all of these. If you look at just reproductive health, right, all the reproductive choices, they're very nuanced, and I think that often people like to take sides and make these issues very black and white when there's a lot of gray, so to speak, in the middle. And I think adoption is there is loss involved in adoption. There's gain, so there's joy and there's heartbreak, and you have to be willing to live with both of those. I think I often ask people, like, what's your intention with adoption? Because if the intention is just to get a baby or add a baby to your family, right? Like, a lot of people who enter the adoption space are dealing with their own grief of not being able to have a child, or others have children, but they're like, I really feel like I should do this. And I mean, I've even talked to people where I feel like, gosh, it was so trendy for a while that everyone was like, we're going to adopt. But I think for me, it was very much, yes, I would love to have another child. But also I'm opening my heart and my life and my family up to another whole family. So, my daughter, I have two girls. One is biological, one was adopted. I love them both so much. They're very unique. But my little one wasn't added to my family to just make my family bigger. And we adopted, in a sense, her whole family as well. There's birth mom, there's aunts, there's uncles, there's cousins, there's grandparents, so this big family. And it's not always that way. There are sometimes you get a call and there's a baby at the hospital and you never know anything about the birth family. But I think what's nice about this is it's just removing a lot of the stigma and a lot of the fear. I hear a lot of fear when people walk into adoption. What if they change their mind? What if something happens? And I think, for me, raising two girls, there's so much, you could fall into so much fear about your biological children, and there's just so much. Right. And so I think, I was talking to somebody about it recently, and they are fostering. It's a really challenging situation, and they have biological children and a foster child. And I remember saying, like, in your home is the brokenness of the world and the hope of heaven. Right? Like, you are seeing the very manifestation. Now, that doesn't mean it's because adoption. I mean, I have friends who are struggling with biological. I have a 16-year-old daughter. Oh, yeah. I feel like life is really not easy right now. And then I have an 11-year-old, but what a beautiful opportunity as parents when we let go of the grip of like, oh, these are my genetics, or I'm such a good parent because I did X, Y, and Z. And then just sort of letting go and just saying, look, that idea of like in my home is the brokenness of this world and the challenges of this world. But my hope is not in this world. And I think it gives a really good perspective.
Right. Whether it's your biological or adopted, it's like Forrest Gump's mom said, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. It's the same with kids, because kids are different. You got 5 kids and 4 of them could be perfect angels. And then one is, the spawn of Satan. It's like, you just never know. The reality is that you're raising up, people to grow up and to be, respectable human beings in the world. And they're going to fight against doing the right things all the time, just like we did. I have to keep reminding myself that I was a kid, I was rebellious, and I thought I knew better than my parents did. So, that's the challenge, so bringing in, a kid from another biological family is, it could be a beautiful thing too. My wife, as you know, she had a kid at 18 years old before I met her, and she placed this child for adoption. And, beautiful story is that, her cousin, 6 weeks later placed her child with the same family. And so these 2 cousins went from being cousins to sisters. And,
wow.
To make the story even more beautiful is that today, she's going on 30 now, and my kids know her as their big sister. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of beauty in adoption, and, there's going to be hard times as well, but we could look at the beautiful times and say, hey, is this the right thing to do, to give a child? Sometimes they have an opportunity to have a better life than they would have if they stay with their birth parents. So it's pretty awesome. Adoption is a beautiful thing. We haven't adopted, but I'm very familiar with the story. It's awesome what you're doing, and keep doing what you're doing. So a couple more things before we get going. A message that you like to pass on to some of the young women that are facing these hard decisions about their reproductive health, and how do you support them in making the most informed and intentional choices?
Gosh, that's a really good deep question. I mean,
you can thank my producer for that. He helped me out with that one.
I think, I think it kind of goes to that question I said earlier, right? Like, if you could silence all the voices in your head, like, what is it that you want to do? I think that's one thing, right? Because I think innately, a lot of times we know the answer, but it's the pressures of the world that kind of get to us. So I think that would be one. The other thing is just a reminder that your value does not come from performance, right? Like we have our lives have inherent value, and fear is so powerful. And I think there's a lot of fear of just performing or appearing a certain way. I think of my own story. I was just so afraid to admit that I'd made a mistake. So then I made more mistakes to cover up. And that just left me so wounded and really hurting, versus what would it have been like if I would have realized that my value and my worth aren't based on how well I perform or how well I make my parents look, and how, the choices I make. And if I had just felt comfortable enough to say, look, I need help. And so I think, to young people, I'm like, look, there's no decision that's too far. There's nothing you can do that makes you unlovable or your life unworthy. And so reach out for help. And hey, if you reach out to one person and they don't respond well, reach out to another. I think just finding that strength, the most courageous thing sometimes to do is to say, I need help. And what an opportunity to allow people to come alongside and help you through a difficult situation. So, yeah.
When I think about the goodness of God is that he doesn't require that we get ourselves all cleaned up before we come to him. He says, come as you are, and we're going to have couple hands full of messes that are just dripping on the floor. And it's nothing that's too big for him. He takes our messes and then he cleans us up just like we would with our own children. You made a mess of yourself, child. Let me help you, because he knows sometimes you just can't do it. There's times I have those days where it's like I throw my hands up and I said, Lord, I ain't got it today. Yeah. So you're going to have to do something because I got nothing. And those are the times where he really comes through for us, when we're open and honest about our situations. And when we consider past traumas where others are just kind of sweeping things under the rug, it's like, no, I'm going to come to him just stripped down, bare naked, and he's going to help pick me up because he loves me that much, because I am his child. So something to really consider. On a more personal note, what are some of the aspects of your life that you feel like you need to be to live more intentionally? Because the name of the show is just being intentional, and part of me doing this is just I'm just simply being intentional, and that's having people on to share their stories. So I want to challenge other people that come on the show, and even those that are listening, to think and consider the things that we know that we need to be doing. So what do you need? What does Talitha Phillips need to be more intentional about in her life?
We live such busy lives. I think even in a city like LA, Claris is a massively full-time job, and then I'm also a doula, and then I have 2 kids. And I think the area I feel most convicted is being more intentional with my kids. Like, there are so many. You could look at my life and be like, oh, she has so many there's so many good things that I do, right? But I have 2 girls at home that need me way more than I'm available. And so I think being intentional with my time with them, and finding a way to block out. I'm on call all the time. And so I think being able to just say, no, you value. I mean, it's interesting. Like, they have a saying where I can tell they know that I'm not really listening to them, where they're like, oh, she's doing this thing in her head, or they'll ask me a question. Right. And so I think, just trying to be more intentional, because I think the window of time that your kids are in the home, I mean, everyone always says this, but it really is so fast. And I'm looking at, I have 2 years left with my other one, with my older one, less than 2 years of her being in the house. And she's not one of those kids that's going to stay home. Like, she can't wait to go to college. She's like, kids so excited. Maybe my other one will never leave me. But I think being intentional with our time together, and it's funny. I feel like everyone prepares you for the first couple years, right? And we pour all this into like, how are we going to handle these babies? But there's not this like guidebook for the teen years, that feels so much harder, honestly. And it's a little bit of a wild card too, because they're growing and changing. And so, that's my point.
So finding that healthy balance between work and then, for me personally, is like, I can just get everything just zapped from me from work, a hard day at work. And then I have to have a little left in the tank for my family. And I could easily say, I just want to come home and just veg out and not have to think anymore, because I've done so much thinking throughout my day. But I mean, this is what I signed up for. So I have to invest in my wife and my kids. And, it's not about me. So I have to consider that, like, these people in my house, they need me. And you talk about how fast it goes. Just recently had my middle child, almost 20 years old. She moved out, living with her best friend now. And now we're preparing for a wedding for our oldest. So in the same year, we're going to go from 3 kids in the house to just 1. And that's just so wild to think about. They've been loaned to me. The Lord has loaned my family to me, and, I have to give them back, and they're going to go off and live their own lives. And, I have to think about, did I do a good enough job? You know, was it subpar? Was it decent? Was it better than average? Like, you just never know. But, you know, sometimes your kids will let you know later on that you did a pretty good job. So we have to just trust in the process, do what we know we're supposed to do with our kids, and hope that they've taken notes and they will let us know later on. So it's awesome to know that. Considering challenges and, you know, being resilient, like running this resource center, Claris Health, what are some of the obstacles that you faced, and how were you able to overcome some of those obstacles running this organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, you know, women's health, reproductive health, whatever, you know, term you want to use, I think might be some of the most polarizing or the most polarizing topic in our nation, especially going into an election year. And it seems there's constantly, you know, things in the news. And I think, you know, for the most of society is used to seeing this in more political terms and attaching labels. And I think one of the challenges that I've experienced is that everyone wants to put you in a box, right? You're either on this side or you're on that side. And if you're on this side, it means this. And if you're on that side, it means this. And I think that the challenge I faced being really young and stepping in, I was a 23-year-old director of this organization, and looking around going, yeah, the way that they were doing things when I joined was not very effective, and it wasn't going to be effective for long, right? So I think I was so fortunate that when I started, I had this board of directors that said, hey, we want to support you and take us on this journey with you, and let's look at the needs of the city and be willing to create a model of care that's actually effective in this city with the people that we're called to serve. And as a result, it meant that we don't look like we're supposed to look, right? It means that the language I use makes sometimes everybody mad, right? Because they're like, no, just speak the language I want to hear, or speak the language I want to hear. And I think it's put us in this really, or me, the challenges I face, it's like I've been put in this place where in a way, sometimes you're accused by all sides. And yet I feel firmly planted with my feet on the ground, saying, this is who we are called to be. And I feel like there's messaging that has unified people around the issue that divides people. So like, I love to think about our gala. We do a fundraising gala every October, and I look around in the room and I get so excited because I'm like, they have no idea. Like, we have different, you know, political parties and faith backgrounds, and all these people join together because they actually care deeply about women and men and families in these situations. And I think there is so much more common ground than our society knows. You know, we're used to the screaming on social media and the political rants and, you know, all that stuff. But when you actually get together and you focus on the story and you focus on the lives, we agree to a lot more than we disagree. And the extremes will always be the extremes. And so I have a hard time with the extremes of both sides. And I think being in the field of actually caring for people gives me a lot of empathy for where people land, and understanding a lot of it is bathed in sort of personal experience. But the truth is, you know, we can all be more empathetic and understanding and listening. You know, a lot of our model came from listening to the needs of the community. So like one little example is, you know, infant and maternal mortality is a huge problem actually in our nation, and especially among, or would say Black and brown women. And the statistics are devastating. And so, you know, you've got this side that everyone loves to talk about abortion. It's like, but let's talk about the maternal mortality rates and infant mortality of these children that are dying under the age of 1. Like, those are equally as important issues. And so it helped us create a voice in the city to say, absolutely, we value these lives. We have a clinic in South LA that largely serves women that are at greatest risk of infant maternal mortality rates. And we're going to develop a prenatal care program that is the only evidence-based program that helps reduce the health disparities that we find in the city. So I think it's just one example of, I can see the positive of that, but it was difficult to, we're not talking about abortion. No, we're talking about this. And everyone wants to keep talking about this. And we're like, no.
Right.
We're focused right now on this, which is an equally important issue. So that gives you one example.
Yeah, you said it. The division within this country is primarily because there's two sides that don't want to hear each other. You're wrong, and end the story. So I'm going to walk away and not give you an opportunity to speak up on why you think this way, why you have these certain beliefs. But I think if we are more willing to come together, we don't always have to agree. But have a little respect for, there are going to be people that have different opinions on things. But the important thing to focus on is like, what are we doing? What is our mission? We are on the side of life, and it's not a political statement. It's just facts. We are here on the side of life. And that's why I stand as a believer, as a Christian. Politics, both sides are wrong. A lot of times, but what is the most important thing that we have to consider? And I'm on the side of life, and that's just not a political statement. And that's where I will remain. But let's keep having those conversations that cause division, but we will have a better understanding and a more of a respect for one another, because we're at least trying to just hear each other out, and then you can keep it moving from there. So the next 5 years for Claris, what are your aspirations?
We have a really exciting opportunity that has been, I haven't talked about this much at all, but sort of in lines of what we've been talking about, is understanding the needs of the city and how fragmented the care is. And so we're in the process of, we are going to be opening a campus actually in South LA, where there's a statistics that says that if a person walks into a social service agency for help, they are on average given 6 to 8 referrals to additional organizations, and how difficult it is to navigate that, especially where there's transportation challenges or mental health issues or past trauma. And so we are trying to bring all of those resources that are particularly for pregnant women and families with kids under the age of 5 under one roof. So we are in escrow on a property right now, and we are linking arms with organizations in the city who do very different things. So right now we have a job placement agency for survivors. We have an organization that is going to handle childcare. So there will be free drop-in childcare. So if you access any service in the campus, you can drop your kids off for 2 hours for free. We have a medical clinic coming in that does pediatric and general health, and hopefully job training. And so we have all sorts of other things. And there will be a playground, a safe playground, basketball court for after school, coffee shop. So really creating a community center that says, look, we want to help eliminate some of these barriers and ultimately change lives, right? We want healthy children in thriving, healthy families. And so that's our goal. So that's a super exciting thing. And I think,
that
from
exciting
vision perspective, and it's not going to be Claris. So one of the things I'll say too, that has been a huge conviction for me is that Claris we're just the stage, right? We're just the platform that allows people to do the work that they're called to do. And so I think, this won't be the Claris campus. I don't know what it's going to be called yet. We're still working on that, but it will be a joint effort that maybe other cities in the nation could adopt as well. And I just think, what if this happened in, New York City and Houston and Miami and Minneapolis, and you got these campuses that came together and said, we're just going to build these communities for people to, because I think one of the hardest things about these situations is you so often just feel alone. Whether you're raising a new baby or whether you placed a child or whether you have a history of pregnancy loss, whatever it is, you think you're the only one, but you're not. And so if you can walk through that in community, I think outcomes will be so much better.
That's awesome. I'm excited to hear about that. Working in homeless ministry, we talk about trauma a lot. We have one of our trainings is trauma informed care. And it's like I said earlier, it's about what is the backstory of this individual that's in front of me. And to have the patience and the willingness to have those conversations to gather more information that will help you to help that person is what we need to be about. And we just need more of those people. And you're definitely one of those people, and I appreciate you for it. If there's anything I could do to help, trying to build a platform, and it's not about me. It's about just doing the right thing. Just being intentional. We will definitely put the word out there so more and more people can hear about what you're up to and what you're trying to do in the future. And we're going to be a support for you in your mission. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think this will touch a lot of people. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll be in touch, and let's keep it going.
Sounds good. Have a good day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys so much for joining the show today. Claris Health is who we want to be looking out for. So do some research on Claris Health and help us support Talitha Phillips and what her mission is. And please help us out if you will. Make sure you like and subscribe so that we can keep getting these stories out there. And we appreciate having you on the show. Thank you guys. God bless.